Welcome to the Velvet Verdict. Before we dive in, I want to honor the way we work. This show is a partnership between human intuition and artificial intelligence. We use AI to navigate the data, but our shared humanity sets the tone and guides our heart. We're here to find the thread that ties us together, even when we feel pulled apart. Today, we're talking about isolation. If you're feeling alone, you're not failing. You're part of a broader human story. Whether you're a man or a woman, you might feel like the other side doesn't get it, or worse, that they're the problem. We get it. The world loves to point fingers. But here, we're turning off the blame game. Both doors are open. We believe men and women are both carrying the weight of this disconnect, and neither of you is the villain. The ache you feel isn't a character flaw, it's a signal. Social science shows us that isolation is a wound we're all nursing, shaped by habits and environments that have drifted us apart. We've all adopted habits that protect us but accidentally push people away. Men and women are caught in these patterns, hurting differently but sharing the same loss of closeness. We aren't here to offer therapy or prescriptions. If you're struggling deeply, please connect with a qualified professional. What we can offer is a compassionate look at the data to help us understand the terrain, and then a humble direction toward healing. We aim to find the hurt and offer gentle direction, not by fixing you, but by reminding you that you're not alone. Because when we stop fighting each other and start tending to the shared hurt, we might just find our way back to connection. Let's walk this path together. So, where do we begin? We start by asking the question that sits at the heart of everything we're feeling right now. Why do men and women both feel the heavy weight of isolation, and how can we use that shared ache to rebuild connection instead of retreating further into our corners? It's easy to look at the headlines and think we're at war. It's easy to feel like the other side doesn't understand the pressure you're under. But the data tells a quieter, more honest story. It shows us that the wound isn't just on one side of the room. It's in the space between us. We're both hurting. We're both lonely. And that shared pain is actually our starting point. Currents pulled us apart, leaving us misunderstood. Beneath defenses, a shared desire to be seen and belong remains. That hope weaves us back together. We're going to look at what the numbers reveal about how we've drifted apart, not to assign blame, but to recognize the pattern. When we see the reality of our isolation clearly, we can stop guessing what the other person is thinking and start seeing them as fellow travelers who are just as tired of the distance as we are. Our goal is simple. We want to move from suspicion to curiosity, from defense to understanding. We're exploring how to turn this mutual ache into a bridge. It's not a clinical fix, and it's not a magic bullet. It's a humble invitation to look at the data, recognize the shared human struggle, and find a gentle direction back to each other. Because healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when we realize we're standing in the same storm and we decide to hold the umbrella together. What the data shows: the global mirror of loneliness. The data reveals a universal ache that transcends borders. A survey spanning 102 countries and territories shows that nearly 1 in 4 people worldwide, 24%, report feeling very or fairly lonely. This isn't an isolated crisis. It's a widespread weight carried by a quarter of the global population. Crucially, the numbers show that this burden is shared equally. Loneliness is reported by 24% of men and 24% of women globally, an identical share for both sexes. The data doesn't point to one gender suffering more than the other. It reflects a common human struggle. Men and women are standing in the same rain, which invites us to set aside division and recognize that isolation affects us all with the same intensity. However, a complete picture requires us to honor the light alongside the shadow. While that quarter feels disconnected, the data also shows that about half of people worldwide, 49%, report they do not feel lonely at all. Nearly half the world is still finding belonging and connection. This is vital context. Loneliness is real, but it is not the total story. Connection remains the experience for the majority, proving that reconnection is possible and that the capacity for community still thrives. These figures ground us in balanced reality. They describe a wound that touches men and women equally, while reminding us that nearly half of humanity is already holding the thread of connection. The direction here is gentle. When we see that the struggle is shared and that connection is widespread, we can move past blame. The data encourages us to look toward the resilience already present in the world and extend that same warmth to those who are still searching. What the data shows: the daily weight and structural shifts. The numbers reveal a daily weight that touches many lives. In a 2023 global survey, over 1 in 5 people reported feeling loneliness for a large part of the previous day. The ache lands differently across ages. Young adults between 19 and 29 report the highest levels of loneliness worldwide at 27%, while those 65 and older report 17%. This pattern reminds us that the early years of independence can feel particularly solitary, inviting us to extend extra patience to those just beginning their journey. Our living arrangements have shifted dramatically. In the US, one-person households have more than tripled over the decades, rising from 7.7% in 1940 to 27.6% in 2020. This trend varies by age. Among adults 65 and older, solo households grew from 9.4% to 11.1% between 2010 and 2020, whereas the share dipped slightly from 17.3% to 16.5% for ages 15 to 64. Meanwhile, time spent alone has stretched for younger generations. Americans aged 15 to 29 spent about 45% more time alone in 2023 than in 2010, moving from roughly 4 hours a day to 6. These shifts mean less built-in proximity, requiring more intentional effort to bridge the distance. Relationship status also shapes our experience. Globally, 28% of unmarried adults felt lonely a lot the previous day, compared to 19% of those married or partnered. This gap highlights the comfort of shared life, yet isolation can touch anyone. Whether single or partnered, men and women both carry the hope for deeper ties. The data describes a world of increased solitude, especially for youth. The direction is to view these shifts not as failures, but as new terrain. We can honor this weight while seeking to weave connection back into our routines, remembering that our shared desire for connection remains strong, even as the landscape changes. What the data shows: the U.S. landscape and the young men gap. Looking at the U.S. landscape, the numbers reveal a nation navigating the aftershocks of isolation. We hold this data with care, knowing behind every percentage is a person longing for belonging. Gallup data from late summer 2024 shows 20% of U.S. adults felt loneliness a lot of the day yesterday. This sits between the pandemic's peak and the subsequent calm. Daily loneliness reached 25% in March 2021, a heavy time for all, before easing to 17% by early 2023. While the general tide has receded, the water remains deep for some. A distinct ache emerges for young men. Among U.S. men aged 15 to 34, 25% reported feeling lonely a lot of the previous day. This contrasts with 18% of U.S. young women and 17% of all other U.S. adults. The resulting 8-point gap between young men and other adults is the widest measured in any country. Globally, the OECD median for younger men is 15%, highlighting that the U.S. experience here is particularly pronounced. This data describes a wound, not a character flaw. For these young men, the path back to connection may feel obscured, requiring patience and intentional support from the wider community. The gap signals unique hurdles in rebuilding ties as the world reopens. Our response can be one of gentle curiosity rather than judgment. Healing doesn't happen in isolation. It flourishes when we recognize these patterns and adjust our approach with empathy. By acknowledging this disparity, we can work to remove barriers and create welcoming spaces where young men feel safe to reach out. The goal is to honor their struggle, weaving them back into community and reminding them they are not alone. What the data shows: the shape of connection and what drives the wound. The numbers reveal a shared ache crossing every border. Globally, daily loneliness ranges from a high of 45% in Comoros to a low of 6% in Vietnam. Self-reported loneliness varies enormously by country. Denmark, Switzerland, Sweden, and the US all have rates below 30%, while Greece, Israel, and Italy are close to or above 50%. Here, 21% of US Adults report feeling lonely in a nationally representative survey conducted in May 2024. About 1 in 6 Americans, 16%, say they feel lonely or isolated from those around them all, or most of the time, including roughly equal shares of men and women, survey of 6,204 U.S. adults, sept. or 5th, 2024. The weight falls heaviest on younger generations, with 22% of U.S. adults under 50 saying they feel lonely or isolated, all, or most of the time, versus 9% of those 50 and older. The wound isn't just about friend counts, it's about how we reach for each other. While 8% of Americans say they have no close friends, 38% report having 5 or more. Specifically, 40% of men and 36% of women say they have 5 or more close friends, while half of men and 55% of women have between 1 and 4. The real divide lives in support styles. When hardship strikes, 54% of women say they'd be extremely or very likely to turn to a friend for emotional support, compared with 38% of men. Similarly, 44% of women would turn to another family member for emotional support, compared with 26% of men. Among lonely U.S. adults, 61% reported not having enough close friends or family, and 65% reported feeling fundamentally disconnected from others or the world. These patterns map a gap in our shared language of care, not character failure. Women often build bridges through direct exchange, while men frequently carry weight in quiet endurance. Recognizing this isn't about assigning blame. It's about seeing that loneliness thrives where needs go unspoken. When we accept both sides are hurting in different dialects, we can start asking better questions and meeting each other where we actually stand. When we look past the noise of who's to blame, a clearer picture emerges. The wound of isolation cuts deep for everyone, even if the scars look different on the surface. Men and women aren't fighting each other. We're both grappling with structural shifts that have eroded our communities, reshaped how we relate, and stripped away the support networks we both relied on. What looks like conflict is often just a mismatch in how we've been conditioned to seek help. One side might withdraw to process, while the other reaches out to connect, and in that gap, misunderstanding blooms. But this isn't a character flaw, it's a difference in dialect born from the same ache. Healing doesn't require one side to change to fit the other. It requires us to recognize that our different expressions are responses to the same pressure. When a man pulls back, it may not be rejection, it may be a plea for space to recharge in a world that demands constant performance. When a woman pushes for connection, it may not be nagging, it may be a desperate bid to anchor against the drift. Seeing this allows us to drop the scorecard. This perspective shifts the burden from fixing to understanding. The direction forward is simple but demanding. Meet the intent, not just the action. If we can honor the shared wound beneath the different behaviors, we stop seeing each other as obstacles and start seeing each other as fellow travelers. We can build new bridges by acknowledging that we are all trying to find our way home, just carrying different maps. The goal isn't to fix the other person, it's to create a space where both ways of being can coexist without fear. That's where reconnection begins. So, where do we go from here? The path forward isn't a grand gesture. It's found in the quiet, daily choices that chip away at the walls we've built. For men and women alike, healing starts with recognizing that our defenses, however protective, have also become prisons. We can begin by trading the armor for a little more softness. This doesn't mean dropping our guard entirely, it means lowering it just enough to let a human being in. Think about the micro connections we've lost. A text that asks, "How are you, really?" instead of just checking in. A pause before reacting to a comment that stings, choosing curiosity over correction. These small shifts signal safety. They tell the other person, "I see you, and I'm not here to judge." When we feel safe, the instinct to retreat fades. Vulnerability often feels risky, especially when we've been hurt. But vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the bridge. For men, it might look like admitting when you're overwhelmed rather than withdrawing. For women, it might mean asking for support without framing it as a test. Both require courage. Both invite closeness. We also need to repair the bad habits that keep us isolated. That means apologizing when we've been dismissive, whether that dismissal came as silence or as criticism. It means listening to understand, not to win. It means accepting that the other person's pain is real, even if it looks different from yours. This work is slow. It's messy. But it's ours. We are a hybrid team of human writers and AI tools, and even we know that connection requires presence. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to be willing to show up, again and again, with a little more grace and a little more openness. That's how we turn the ache into a bond. The isolation you feel isn't a sign you're broken, it's a signal you're human, just like everyone else listening right now. Whether you're a man carrying the weight of unspoken expectations or a woman navigating the exhaustion of emotional labor, the ache underneath is the same. It's the quiet longing to be known, to be safe, and to belong. We spent too long treating these differences as walls, when they're really just different doors leading to the same room. We can find our way back to each other. Healing doesn't happen in the echo chamber of our frustrations. It happens when we step across the divide. So here's the invitation. Reach out. Not to debate, not to score points, but to connect. Send that text to a friend you've lost touch with. Ask a partner how they're really doing, and listen to the answer without trying to fix it immediately. Offer a compliment to a stranger. These small acts of courage bridge the gap between men and women and rebuild the bridge within yourself. You're allowed to be vulnerable, to meet others, and to forgive missteps as you learn to walk this path together. There is hope on the horizon, built one conversation at a time. If the weight of isolation ever feels too heavy to carry alone, please remember that professional help is available. Seeking support from real experts is brave, and there is no shame in finding guidance through the darkest patches. Your well-being matters, and reaching out is a step toward healing, not a sign of failure. You deserve support, and you deserve peace. The Velvet Verdict is crafted by a team of human writers working alongside AI, because we believe the best insights come when empathy meets intelligence.